Hello, everyone. My name is Pat, and I am an alcoholic. First, giving honor to God, who's truly the head of my life. He got me sober, and he keeps me sober one day at a time. I don't have anything to stick my chest out about. I couldn't do it. I could not stop drinking and stay stopped one day at a time. I could not do it. But God, in all his infinite wisdom and power and knowledge, brought me to a program. Let me tell you about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. This book, the first 164 pages literally saved my life. I'd also like to thank Craig and the committee for giving me one more opportunity to participate in my recovery. I'm really grateful and I'm honored, and I don't take this lightly. I want to tell you the little story about how this came about. Craig asked me to chair a meeting, and it's been nothing but surprises. I'm telling you right now. He asked me to chair this meeting, and I committed, and like a lot of times I had overbooked myself because I was going to Buffalo with my husband, and so I call my sponsee, and I tell her, well, you have to go chair this meeting for me. And so the meeting was on Lake Avenue. She goes to Brighton. So I'm like, now how did she get that wrong? But that's okay. I saw Craig, and he was like, well, I really want you to chair the meeting. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'm at my daughter's baby shower, and I'm watching the clock. I got to go chair this meeting because I made a commitment, and that's important to me today. I made a commitment, and I need to go. So I left the baby shower. I go over there. I chair the meeting. And after the meeting, this whole group of people just crowd around me. So I'm like, okay, because they usually come up and say, thanks or whatever. And they said, we came here before, and we're from the committee, and we were here to watch you, and we came back. So I was like, oh wow, I'm glad they didn't tell me that, because I would have been rehearsing. That's kind of like what I was like. I was a pretender. All my life, I've never felt quite comfortable in my own skin. All my life, Even as a little girl, I always felt different. And I look at pictures from my mom's house, and I see myself sitting in the background looking on, and they're dancing and having a good time. And, I just never felt a part of, and I found alcohol. I found alcohol at such an early age. I'm telling you, I just drank, and I don't have to go all the way back in my childhood to tell you about how that alcohol evolved, but in my life. But I'm going to go back to when I was about 14 or 15 years old, because see, when I was a little girl and I was coming up, the alcohol, stealing the alcohol, bringing it in my room, that's not what brought me to you. That's not what brought me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. What brought me to you was the pain. The pain was so incredibly great. It was so deep, and I didn't have anywhere else to go, because by the time I got here, I was ready to die. I was ready to die, but I'm a chicken, so I couldn't kill myself, And so I did what they told me to do. But I was about 14 years old, 15 years old, and back then, I went to Monroe High School, and we had skipping school parties every Friday, me and my girlfriends, and we would get our brothers to buy us the Boone's Farm apple wine and the Strawberry Hill and the Bally High. I'm dated myself. That's okay. And we would come to my house, because my mom worked days, and my best friend's mom, she worked evenings. So we would come to my house, and we would drink all day, and this continued all through that year, and somebody should have paid attention, but they didn't. But we would drink all day, and at the end of this day, we would go back up to the school to show everybody what a great time we had, because what else do you do when you're drinking all day? So we get up to the school, and I've always sought attention. Always. I've always sought attention. I've always sought approval. And so whatever I needed to do to get that is what I did. And this particular day, we get up to the school. We're like really embalmed with alcohol. And we're on our way back, and there's a bridge that runs between Clinton Avenue and Broadway. And under this bridge, if you're from Rochester, that's 490 down there. And I got on the other side of that bridge, and I'm hanging on by one hand. I'm also a ham. I'm screaming and hollering and everything, and I drew this crowd, and I loved it. I drew that crowd. But you know what? God had his hand on me. Because he has a plan and he has a purpose for my life. And I didn't fall. My girlfriend, she coaxed me back on the other side of that bridge, and we went home. And, all day long I had been drinking. Now, my friends, they would stop drinking, and they'd go into my kitchen and raid the kitchen, but not me. By that time, I really had passed into the state of alcoholism, and I qualify that I had passed into the state of alcoholism, but nobody paid attention, so who knew? When we got done with the wine that we had bought, I get behind the bar. We had this bar in our den, and there was Johnny Walker Red, there was CC, and there was Naughty Head, Seagram's gin, and I'm mixing all this stuff, and I'm drinking, and, but I get back home, and so I want more attention. So what do you think I did? I played dead. So my cousin does stuff like right, and she called the ambulance. Now, a normal person would have said, okay, enough is enough, but not me. So I'm laying there playing dead, and the ambulance comes, and they take me. And now I just told you that I had been home. I had been drinking all day. So the ambulance takes me to Strong Hospital. My mother works at Strong Hospital. And I don't know about anybody else's mother, but you don't want to play with my mother, embarrassing her on her job, But I get in this ambulance, and I'm riding there, and then they started to ask me what happened, and I said I fell on the balance beam at school, because I got to get this story right, So they take me to the hospital. Now, my mother's on her way home, and I'm on the way in the ambulance to the hospital. And they did all these x-rays of my head and my body and everything, because I fell on the balance beam, But of course, I had never been to school. So years later, my mom said to me, they told me, Johnny, I don't think Patty hit her head in gym. I think Patty was drunk. And my mother said, oh, no, not my Patty. Where would she get it? I chased alcohol, too. I chased alcohol. And my life was kind of like that in high school. We stole cars. I was a cheerleader. What else do you do to get attention? We would go to these after parties after the football games and stuff like that, and I would nurse the bar and sit at the bar, and we would steal people's cars, running into other cars that are down the street and stuff like that. Never thought anything of it, and I hope nobody is here that came out one morning and got bumped up car. But anyway, we did things like that. And so I remember clearly going through high school just like that, and no one paid attention. No one paid attention. And I am sure that I had become alcoholic. I get out of high school, and things weren't going right. So I decided, when I was born in Miami, Florida. At 8 weeks old, my mother left my dad, and she moved to Rochester. So I had a major resentment against my mom most of my life because she took me from my dad, and all I wanted was my dad in my life. If my dad would have been there, everything would have been okay, But I moved to Miami. By now I find out I'm doing a geographical cure. I moved to Miami, and I get there, and I right across the street from my aunt in Liberty City, there's an elementary school. It's Alapata, and there's a pool over there. There's this lifeguard there, and I get to this school, and guess what? He became my boyfriend because he had beer in the trunk of his car. And so I went to the pool every single day. I'd be calling my mom, you got to send money. I'm looking for a job. I can't find a job. And I need to back up a little bit because before I graduated from high school, I had a consequence, a major consequence. She's a beautiful 33-year-old daughter. But I had a consequence, and I left that consequence with my mom, because I wasn't responsible. I didn't know how to be responsible. I didn't know what being a mother was, but I moved to Florida, and I do that, and things weren't going right after a while, and so I moved back to Rochester. And it took me coming to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to find out, that I had been doing geographical cures trying to fix me, trying to fix it, and it just wasn't fixing. So I moved back and forth, and things weren't right here, and I did what I do best. I run. And I ran back and forth from Rochester to Florida, and then I get back here, and I get a job at one of the major companies in Rochester. And I remember, one particular day, I went to lunch. I met this guy, and this guy had what they told me was top shelf. I don't know, because it didn't matter what I drank. He had Hennessy and stuff like that. And so I get in the car with him, and I went to lunch, and I went back to work 3 days later. Something was wrong. Something was wrong. But of course, what do? I go into work, and and my group chief calls me in, and she says, Patty, you're a really good worker, and we're gonna have to put you on a program, but because of your behavior. So I said to her, well, you know what? Can you just fire me, please, so I could draw unemployment? But the reason I wanted her to fire me so I could draw unemployment is because I wanted to drink, but I didn't know that. I don't know what's wrong with me, so she didn't fire me. So what else do? I grandstand. I quit my job because I don't care about that. I wanted to drink. It was more important for me to drink than to do anything, and I continued that behavior. It talks about in the doctor's opinion, it says we are maladjusted to life, in full flight from reality, outright mental defects. I was not adjusted to life at all. Not adjusted. I did not know how to live, in full flight from reality. I ran from everything that was real. I didn't know what responsibility was. I didn't know how to pay bills. I didn't know how to do anything but drink alcohol. So I nursed the bar, an outright mental defect. My thinking is not quite like what they call normal people, if they're normal, but I remember clearly I would go to these bars, and I'd be hanging out at Sarah's Gardeners and all these bars, and everybody thought I went with the bartender, but I really was just up there nursing. They gave us bubbles at that time, and the people would buy you drinks, and they'd set the bubbles up, and who in the world is going to dance when you got bubbles there? No, not me. I'd be sitting there, and so many nights I'd leave the bar like I need a V8. I'd be like walking crooked, but, and I thought that was okay, because as long as I didn't fall down, and my drinking progressed. It says that men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. It was my liquid courage. It was my liquid power. It told me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Nothing in my life operated without the alcohol. Every single thing I did was centered around alcohol. I needed to start looking for a job. I'm a legend in my own mind, and I don't really want to go out and look for a job, but I'm sitting around my living room one day, and I realized, I need some furniture. So I'm looking around, and I'm sitting there with some Planters rum and Coke, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm drinking, and I'm just thinking, okay, what I'll do is I'll just go and I don't have a job. I'll just go to the bank and just apply for a loan. That's what people do, but normal people go when they have a job. So I go get all dressed up, because, see, I know how to do that real good. I get all dressed up. I go to the bank, and I had to make amends to Citibank. It used to be right next door to here. And I go to the bank, and I apply for this loan, and these folks gave me a loan. I told them I was a freelance model. I looked the part. I told him I was a freelance model, so there wasn't really any particular person he could call for a reference, and I went home, and I'm still drinking, I go home, and I change clothes again, and I walk back in there, and he told me he gave me the loan, and I was like, yes, and I just chased things that I wanted. Every single thing about Pat was outward. There was absolutely nothing going on in the inside. By the time I got to you, I was dressed up on the outside. I knew how to play the part, but I was dying on the inside. And I ended up, I got this furniture. I don't have a job. So what do you think? They didn't come get the furniture, but now I'm getting all kinds of stuff started happening. I kept going to the bars. By now, I'm about ready for my second consequence. She's 27. Who would end up being my first husband, and the guy that had the Hennessy years before, we're still hooked up every now and then, and, it didn't really matter. I used to have this motto: whoever comes first, that's who I'm going out with, and I did not know how to be in a relationship, I like the effect of men, too, and I'm so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, because it taught me how to live, but I was in this relationship, and we ended up having another daughter. We ended up moving together, and just my life was just going on a downward spiral, but I didn't know. How would you know? If you don't know what's wrong with you, it's impossible to apply the solution. It's impossible. So I'm like going around and I'm doing all these things, and now I'm having another daughter. I don't know how to live, and I'm on welfare by now, and just my life was so incredibly unmanageable. I would get food stamps, and I don't know how to buy food, because for me, of course, I'm a grandiose person. You go out, you get steak and you get lobsters. You buy all kinds of stuff that you can't eat off of all month, and you got these little kids at home, and by then my girlfriends, of course, we're all at an age where we should have been working. They're working and coming over to my house. My house was the drop in, and they would come on their lunch break, and when they get there on their lunch break, they'd bring it, and we'd sit there and we'd play cards and we'd drink alcohol. Now, my friends didn't make it to this program, poor them, but they would come to my house. We would drink and play cards, and then they'd get up and they'd go to work. Well, guess what? They would come one after another, so I drank all day long. And as a result of them leaving the alcohol, anybody else would have put it away, I drank all night long. Now, I did not know how to live. I didn't know how to take care of these kids. I'm doing the best I can, but I'm in full-blown alcoholism. I am in full-blown alcoholism, and I don't know what to do. One particular day, I'm on the way having my third consequence. She's a beautiful 26-year-old daughter. And I just, one day I came to. Obviously, I had started having blackouts and things. I came to, and I was in a closet, and I didn't want my life like that anymore, and I heard the baby crying. They're 16 months apart, and I heard the baby crying out there, and I didn't know where she was, but I was in a corner in the closet. And I picked up the phone and I called Millbank Health Center, and when I called there, they sent me to see a psychiatrist, and so there was my start with them. And I went there and I started telling them how mean and cruel my kid's father was. He wasn't my husband yet, and how awful he was to me. But I never once told them about my drinking. They probably knew, but I never once admitted it, and after a few days, I felt a little bit better, and so I go back to my old behavior, drinking all day long. And I remember I was drinking one particular day, and I'm pregnant, but I haven't confirmed that I'm pregnant. I go to the doctors, and so they called it a rabbit test back then, and I don't know if they still do, but they give me this test, and I was like, oh no, that can't be right. I can't be pregnant. I've got a baby. So I was like, give me another test. So she was like, okay, well, this one's positive too. I was like, oh no, that had to be bad. Give me another test. So I saw this lady some years later, and she was like, yeah, how's that rabbit? And I said, here she is right here, But that was my behavior. I drink and I did other things. When I came to you, I was a liar, a cheat, a thief, a woman of ill repute. I had no morals. I had the morals of an alley cat, and because what my behavior allowed me to do as a result of my drinking was anything. It didn't matter. Anything. There were times that I was in situations where guns were being pulled to my head. One of my geographical cures, I moved to Florida. I get down there, and I go to Sarasota this time because Miami's not for me, I go to Sarasota this time. I had $100. At that time, you could get a one-way ticket for like $86. So I must have had like $14 left. I get there. I take this, they call it a limo, but it was a van. I take this van to my cousin's house. So I thought it was her house, but it was her friend's house, and it was a one-bedroom apartment, but that was okay because we all drink and everything, so we just lived on top of each other. But this particular day, we get, the day that I got there, we go down to this bar. Where else do you go but to celebrate that I'm here? And so we get down to this bar, and my cousin jumps in the car with somebody. I don't know a soul except my cousin, and she leaves me standing here with this guy. So I'm standing there talking to him, and all of a sudden this 48 DeSoto drives up, and it's black, and it's cool. This thing was so clean. This 48 DeSoto drives up, and he said, that's Gang Green, and he owns this bar. And guess what? He was my boyfriend, and I mean, what else? He owned a bar, So I get in there, and they're like putting drinks out, and putting drinks out for me and stuff like that. And it was just a matter of time to see my drinking will tell me what to do and what to say. And just a matter of time, I had him a poor guy, I had him into my little grips, and, and I'm like crying and pretending all this stuff because I'm making it up as I go. And, how hard things were in Rochester. So that's why I moved to Florida. And then he got us a place, and we start living together, and, and then after a while, he didn't want me to go to the bar. Go figure, he didn't want me at the bar anymore. So I'm just like, I can't, I need an outlet. So now I got to get a job, because that's about the only thing that he was going to let me go out and do. So I get this part-time job at Sears, and I get to Sears and I meet these people, and somehow I get in a relationship with this guy that was going to bars, and not his bar, but other bars, the Dry Dock and stuff like that. And so I start hanging out with him, and one day I come home, and this guy is pissed off because he rode up. I'm driving another one of his cars. He rode up to my job, found out I was gone. I'm telling him all the time that they keep me afterwards to clean up and stuff like that. Oh my gosh. And this man pulled a gun to my head, and I needed to do a geographical cure quick, and he sat on me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with him, but I'm like living on this man, and I end up coming back to Rochester, and and I'm getting into things now, and things are starting to happen to me now, and several times in a row, I know that God had his hand on me, because these men, I don't know what's wrong with them, they kept pulling guns on me, and because I was doing things, and I was lying. I'm a liar by nature, but I'm lying, and I'm saying the wrong things at this particular time, and I was getting into a lot of trouble, and so I ended up, I end up with this particular person that would end up being my first husband, and, because I knew my life wasn't right, and we end up becoming Muslim. So I did a religious cure, and we were Muslim, and we had these friends that we wanted to join a social club, and as we joined the social club, what do you think? They said, well, we were selling alcohol. They said, well, let's keep it at their house. They're Muslim, because Muslims don't drink. And for a period of time, I did stop drinking. And they kept the alcohol at our house, and I got these kids, and the doctor had given me this recipe for cough syrup, and it said 1 part lemon, 1 part honey, and 1 part whiskey. So I got a cold. And so I had a cold for a whole year. Every single day, I would go down in that basement, and first I started out, I'd have a cup of tea, and I was sneaking, and I'd put a little whiskey in there, and I'd have honey, lemon in my tea, and then by the end of that year, I had a lot of whiskey, sometimes honey, sometimes tea, but mostly it was whiskey. And by now, I'm getting really in full flight from reality, and I'm down there, and I'm pretending I love salt and pepper hair, and I'm down there with pretending I'm married to Ed Bradley. I'm done with this husband, because he's not treating me right, and I'm just like so absorbed with me. But I don't know what's really going on, and I'm sitting there, and I got my whiskey, and this husband comes downstairs, and he's like, Basim, what are you doing down here? Well, now my kids are in Sister Claire Muhammad School, and I'm down there with these shirts in the sink, and I'm washing the shirts, pretending, because I had them in the sink, and he comes down there, and I'm scrubbing it, because I'm not leaving the alcohol that was between the washer and the sink. So I'm like scrubbing the shirt, and he's talking to me. He never talked to me, at least if he did, I didn't hear him. And so I'm scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, and he wouldn't leave. I ended up scrubbing my whole skin off of my knuckles. I just couldn't leave the alcohol. So now it's becoming a problem with me drinking at home or sneaking to drink at home, because now I'm trying to balance the bottles and trying to put water in them and, bring the levels back up. And so I end up, I said to him, you know what? I need an outlet. You got to start staying home. Now I'm Muslim. I need an outlet. You got to start staying home with the kids, so I'm going to go out on Fridays. So I start going out on Fridays, and I start hanging out at the Calabash. This was a bar, a really nice bar here some years ago. And what do you think? I get there, and I find this guy that drank just like me. And so I didn't know how to be a wife. I absolutely had no clue what being a wife was. I end up at this bar, and I met this guy, and we started hanging out, and just a matter of time, I started not showing up, not coming home, and by now I've got like 4 beautiful daughters, And I'm like, I just didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to be a wife. And I'm telling you right now, with every fiber of my being, I did not get into that marriage to not be a good wife. I really intended on straightening out my life. I intended on straightening out my life. When I got married, I was going to be a good wife. I was going to be a good mother, whatever that was. I was going to do it, but I started going out, and just a short period of time, I stopped coming home, and I wasn't a good wife, and I wasn't a good mother. And I don't know about anybody else. After you stay out all night and you wake up, you just don't go home the next morning right away, because you got to get your story together. So I started going over my friend's house, my aunt's house, anywhere, and he's starting to look for me, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, and he started being very physical at me. So by the time I got to you, I was telling you all of the things that he had done to me. He was beating me and he was doing all this stuff, but the reality was I wasn't coming home. The reality was I was leaving him with them babies, and for him to take care of, and I remember we went to court and for our divorce, and he said to the judge, he said, Your Honor, I don't think me and my wife need a divorce. I think my wife needs a psychiatrist. And I thought, I don't need a psychiatrist. What's wrong with you? I just don't want to be married to you, And so I end up going through that divorce and getting with this man because he loved me. But the reality was he drank just like I drank. So I end up now, I've got these kids, and I've got 5 beautiful daughters, and I got these kids, and I'm like, I'm staying out at the bars with this guy because he loved me so much. He just could not go anywhere without me. But I worked on a job where, I made a decent income, and every day I'd go to the bar across the street, and that bar would lead to another bar, and I just wasn't making it home. And I'm not proud of this because after a while, I started leaving those babies home by themselves with who would end up being my 12-year-old daughter by now. And, and I'd be calling home saying, make hot dogs, and go over on Vicky's and eat, and stuff like that, And I remember clearly, nothing crowded into my mind to say, you know what, you've had enough, go home, nothing, and I would stay out. And now I'm at this job, and I'm going to work, and I'm lying, and I'm sleeping under my desk on a lunch break and things like that. And when I came to you, I told you, the last one hired is the first one they let go. They separated us. Those people got rid of my butt, because I stopped coming to work. I didn't know how to work anymore, and those things started to happen. I was in the downward spiral, and I would end up going to this job that I had quit years later. I end up going back to that job because I figured now I'm married to this other guy. They won't know it's me. I changed my name, So I walk into this job one particular day, and this young lady was sitting there, and she was still there. Now, how? This was years later. She was still on the job. And I walked in, and she was like, Pat, aren't you the one that went to lunch for 3 days? I was like, shh, they might find out who I am, And I get on this job one more time, and it was a very short period of time before I'm going into the bathroom, and because I have to drink. I don't know anything else. I was restless, irritable, and discontented unless I sensed the ease and comfort at last that comes by taking a few drinks. I would sit there, and I would end up, I'm looking at the clock, just waiting for a break in the beginning, and then I started taking too many runouts to go to the bathroom, and they started talking to me about that, so I pretended I had this bladder problem. They said, you need to see a doctor. So but I would run back and forth to the bathroom, and, and things were going on in my life, and, I don't know what to do, and this particular guy and I ended up getting into a whole bunch of other things with him, and I ended up, my boss was getting ready to fire me, and I told her that I needed some help, and so I ended up in Park Ridge for the first time in 1989. But of course I go into Park Ridge, and I didn't go for me. I went for my job. I go into Park Ridge, and I walked through that door, and I got on a fur coat, with a fur headband. I got 5 pieces of Samsonite luggage, like I'm going to a resort, right? I walk through that door like I'm Elizabeth Taylor or something, and I was like, could you check my bags in? I mean, those people had to think I was nuts, So the lady was like, well, you got a lot of stuff and we got to go through it. So I kept running back and forth up there because I'm nervous. I'm full of fear. I don't know how to live, so I'm running back and forth, and I was like, could you just give me my things? And finally that afternoon she said, well, we can't give you this because it has perfume in it and you might drink it. I'm not going to drink that. Do you know how expensive that is? I am a pretender. Like anything was going on right in my life, anything, but I go into Park Ridge that first time and I didn't hear a thing. Honey, let me tell you, the only thing I did when I got into Park Ridge was I found somebody. I took an application from him. I evicted my husband from Park Ridge. I was in a relationship because I thought that man made enough money that he could take care of me. And I had no clue how to stay sober. I didn't hear anything and I didn't do anything. And I got back out of there, and the only reason that I went to meetings is to show everybody what a good AA couple we were. Now, let me tell you something. You don't be going to no rehab finding no man. And my friend Winston from Buffalo, he says it so eloquently. He said, he was in a coma and I was still in a blackout. I mean, we come out of there and me and this man, we're having this relationship and, I don't really want to be with this man. And then I found out that my husband made more money to him. The only reason that I stayed sober, the only reason that I stayed dry is because you were giving me those tests. Because all I need now is a reason. All I need is a reason. See, there was untreated alcoholism going on there. I'm in Park Ridge and the guys were bringing my tray to the table and stuff like that. I thought I got it going on, and I end up out of there and I went back with my husband. And one particular day, it was our anniversary. He said, we need to celebrate our anniversary. Just have a little bit of champagne. All I need is a reason. All I needed was a reason. And I took that one little bit of champagne. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore, And it was a very short period of time that I was back to drinking again. And then my life started on that downward spiral because there was nothing in me to tell me how to stay sober, absolutely nothing, and I ended up getting into things and he ends up coaching this semi-pro football team, and that semi-pro football team, he said the guys think you're a square because you won't drink and stuff like that, and so I'm like drinking better than any of them, and I start getting thrown out of Fast Eddie's and stuff like that because by now when I drink at the end of my drinking at the end of the night, I want to fight, Now, listen here. This is the biggest I ever been in my life, in my whole life, okay? I was about 50 pounds thinner than I am right now. If you said something to your woman, I was in your face. To don't you disrespect her. I'm telling you, I could have been dead just by that, But that's just the way that I was, And I end up, this husband ends up in the hospital for back surgery, and I'm sitting there and I'm getting jealous because one more time, there's nothing in me to tell me anything. I wasn't going to meetings. I wasn't hearing anything. As a matter of fact, I was comparing with, I was like, oh my gosh, that never happened to me. Oh my gosh, she lost her kids. Oh my gosh, they lost their house. They lost their car. I'm comparing everything, and so I end up, I'm sitting there with him in the hospital one day. I had to go back to an aftercare program because my life had hit another bottom, and I'm sitting in there in that hospital and I'm looking at him and he's doing this morphine drip, and I left that hospital and I bought a 40 ounce. And when I bought that 40 ounce, I'm telling you right now, something happened in my life and it took off, and I remember my pastor, he came to see me, and he said, all you got to do, Pat, is come to church. Come to church and you'll be okay. But I never once went to church and said, you know what, I feel like drinking. I never once told a soul in that church that I felt like drinking. I'm anointed to teach the word of God, but I'm not anointed to live it. And it was a very short time that I was up there teaching these teens. I was department head over teen service, and I'm teaching these teens the uncompromised word. And I'd leave that place, and I'm not proud of this. And this is a part of that demoralization. I'd leave that place, and I'd turn that corner, and I'd get that 40 ounce because I needed to drink. I did not know what was wrong with me. I did not realize that I suffered from a threefold disease. It's spiritual, it's mental, it's physical. I have a soul sickness, that spiritual malady, that hole inside of me that I tried to fill with men and money and booze and things, outside things, that I found out the only thing that could fill it was God. But I didn't know. It's mental. I suffer from a mental obsession. That restless, irritable, and discontentment, that mental obsession that when I'm not even drinking, I'm thinking about how I'm going to get it, where I'm going to get it, who I'm going to steal from, all those kinds of things. And that physical allergy, that craving, that phenomenon of craving. Actually the craving is a phenomenon, that unexplained occurrence of that long, strong desire. I suffered from that, but I didn't know, because now I've been into different rehabs and I never learned anything because I didn't try to learn anything. I didn't try to do anything, but I get with that husband and we get out there and we're doing everything, and I end up, I'm drinking now, and I stopped going to work again. I'm still on that job, and I stopped going to work because I sat there one day and I just kept going in and out, So I went home and I just decided not to go back, and I was drinking every single day. I wake up in the morning and I had to have a certain level of alcohol in this body just to function, and I'd put that alcohol in my body and, and I'd be okay. And I'd say that, this is going to be the last one. I'm not going to drink anymore. This is it. I am not going to drink anymore. And and that's how I found out what the true nature of powerlessness was. I'd get into the shower and I'd decide that I'm not going to drink, and I put on my 2 pairs of pants and stuff, and I'd get in my car and I'd turn the corner and the beer sign would jump out at me, and I had to drink. And I'm one more time staying out all night long, and I'm with a different man, so it didn't matter because I had me with me, and I'm drinking and I'm staying out all night long and doing the things that I should not be doing, and we end up, I get this income tax check, and we end up in a hotel for a weekend. I'm going on weekend binges now, and we're in a hotel, and something happened that weekend. I'm embalmed with alcohol. I had developed the DTs, and I was telling everybody that my husband had this bug jar in the closet, and he was releasing these bugs on me, and I'd be saying, see, it's on my skin, and nobody could see it, and I'd be waking my kids up, putting them down at the heat vent so they can hear the people downstairs, and there was nobody downstairs. But I end up in this hotel room, and we had been drinking, and lesions I thought they were lesions on my skin, and they looked like bloodsuckers and things like that, and I thought someone was touching me all over. That particular weekend I hadn't eaten. I probably in about 4 or 5 days, and I hadn't eaten anything at all. I was just drinking and doing other things, and I remember at this particular point, I thought what happened, my perception of that day is that I was going to run because all of a sudden my sight went away, and I thought I was running and I was screaming to the top of my lungs and the police were going to come and save me, and the police didn't come. If they had, I'd still be in jail right now. But I thought I was running, and my husband's account of that day, that particular husband, was that my body was my body was twisted and mangled, and that this voice was coming out of me, saying, "I'm going to kill you." And I remember I had lost my sight and I had lost my hearing. Just fluids were running all over me, and I remember when I could feel his arms around me, and he started to say, "God, please don't let my wife die. Please don't let my wife die. Pat, pray, please pray." And I started to say, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And my sight started to come back and my hearing started to come back. And at that point I started calling Park Ridge every single day. "Please let me in there. You've got to let me in there. If you don't let me in there, I'm going to die." And they said that they didn't have a bed for me and I could take that and abuse stuff. And I was like, no, I don't want to take something to stop drinking. And so I was like, please let me in there, because at that point I had to drink just to be okay. The bed would be shaking, and I would have to get some alcohol, which was stored in shoes and in jackets and all over my house. I just had it everywhere, so that I couldn't, they would get it from me and they would pour it out. And this particular time, my daughter, but now she's grown and she's in this training, this gun training. And she said that she called home and she was like, Mom, are they going to let you in there? And I said, well, honey, I said, they said they don't have a bed. She said, Mom, give me the number. And so I gave my daughter the number, and we call it divine intervention. And she called that Park Ridge one more time, and the lady said, no, we don't have a bed for your mother. And my daughter said, you know what, lady, maybe you don't care about my mother, but we do. And she said, right at that moment, another deputy came up and said, Deputy, is this your gun? And she said, oh, no, that's not my gun. Mine's cleaned and put away. And she said, the lady said, tell your mom to call me in an hour. And we called that divine intervention because I did call back in an hour. They found a bed. They said, be here on Friday. Now that I wish I could tell you that I stopped drinking, but I could not stop drinking. And I'm telling you that I would go every day and I would have to drink, and that particular Friday, my daughter wouldn't go to school. My daughters wouldn't go to school. My daughter took off work. My husband, that husband took off work, and they escorted me to Park Ridge. They wanted to make sure I got there. And I walked through those double doors. And let me tell you, when I walked through those doors, I turned around because I didn't want to live like that anymore. I had looked in the mirror and there was nothing looking back at me. And I remember that day I turned around and I said, you know what? This time I'm going to find out what's wrong with me, because good wives and good mothers and people that believe in God, they don't act like this. And right before I had gone in there, I said, you know what, God, if you can heal the sick and raise the dead and make the blind see, why can't you heal me of this? Why can't you take this away? And he said, I gave you the medicines. I heard it that audibly. He said, I gave you the medicine. I said, God, they said there's no cure. He said, I gave you the rooms. I knew exactly what to do. But you know what? I'm so self-centered. I said, no, I can't go back there. Look at me. So I definitely wasn't coming back to you. But I went in there. And the second day after I got into Park Ridge, I bought this book. And I'm telling you right now, I would get up at 5:30 every single morning, and I would go into the shower because my roommate didn't like prayer, and I would pray. And what I thought I was praying for was restoration of my family, and things like that. But let me tell you, they only let me be in there for 14 days. As a matter of fact, Park Ridge put me on a blackout. They said I couldn't talk to men, that I couldn't look at them, and if I was willing to sign this contract, I could stay. And I signed that contract because at that particular point, I had desire to live. And I signed the contract. I'm telling you, I had to sit at a table with only women. If a man was there, I had to move and sit by myself. When I walked down the hall, I had to look down, but I was willing. I was willing because I did not want to die. And it would come a test to my sobriety. They let me out 14 days later. And I got out of that Park Ridge, and one of my daughters now, the second daughter, is graduating from college, and I'm on my way to pick her up, and my spirit said to go pick up my other daughter from junior high, my baby. And I went to go pick up Naima, and that day, the test of my sobriety would be that I found out 1 hour after I left Park Ridge that that particular husband had molested my baby daughter. He had raped her, while I was in Park Ridge. And I'm telling you, I'm driving up to this college, and I've got this information. I'm 14 days sober, and I don't know what to do. But they told me to go to meetings, and they told me to get a sponsor that has a sponsor. And they told me to get on my knees and ask God to relieve the obsession. It's the three pertinent ideas. It said, A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, that B, probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, but God could and would if he were sought. And I got on my knees every single morning and sometimes all throughout the day, and I just asked God to help me through this, and he is so wonderful. I didn't find out every single thing at that moment, but I found it out in bits and pieces, and I had a friend, because I'm in early sobriety, who said, Patricia, get in this book. If you get in that book, I guarantee you, your life will change, and I started to get in this book, and I first I started getting into it at fear because I knew he was going to be yelling at me, and stuff like that. But I got into the book, and I'm running to meetings and things like that, and I'm holding on to my baby because I don't know what to do. Nothing in me said do anything like call the police at that particular time, and there was this Sister B retreat and it came to Rochester, and I went to that retreat, and I got centered. I called the police, and that man's doing 14 to 35 today, because you taught me how to suit up, how to show up, how to grow up, and I didn't know how to do that at first, but I kept coming, and I kept doing the things that you told me to do. I had to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. I had to turn those thoughts and those actions over, because I found out my problem is on page 62 of this book. And I found out my solution is on page 63. You know what? It says that we are selfish and self-centered, full of 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Seemingly they hurt us without provocation. But we find that sometime in the past, we've made decisions based on self that later placed us in a position to be hurt. So we think that our troubles is of our own making. It arises out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. It says we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us, and God makes that possible. He made it possible. It said this is the high and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. You know what? I had to turn my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions over to him. I got on my knees with my sponsor and I said that third step prayer. It said, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thy will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties that victory over them may bear witness to those that I might help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And it didn't say amen right there. I had to get into action. I had to do the footwork. See, God's not coming out of no sky. He ain't jumping out of me to do the footwork. I had to do the footwork. I got down and I put all of those things, those resentments, those fears, the dishonesty, all of those things that had been blocking me from God. I had to put those things down on paper. When I looked at myself, the behaviors, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. I got with a sponsor and I talked about it. I shared the things in my life that I thought I'd never share with a living soul. I had pushed them so far down, I thought that I would never, ever share them with a living soul. But you taught me how to suit up and show up and grow up. You know what? Once I shared those things, I was able to look at the defects of character that had been blocking me from the God of my understanding. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. I needed to be of maximum service to God and you and the people around me, whether they're in or out of these rooms, and I did the footwork, and I got to that 7th step, and I got on my knees, and I said that 7-step prayer with my sponsor, and I said, amen. And then my sponsor said, you know what, now you go back to that 4th step, and you got to make a list of the people that you had harmed, and you have to be willing to make amends to them all. And you know what? I have a sponsor. Let me tell you something. Put one foot in my butt and one foot on my butt, okay? Because that's what I need. That's what I need. I already told you how I am. A manipulator, a liar, a cheat, a woman of ill repute. So I did that work, and you know what? First of all, it isn't about me. I had to find that out. This walk, this journey is absolutely not about me. It's all about him. It is all about him. And I remember I started to look at those things and I started to make amends, and my sponsor said, Pat, don't you go out to make the amends. You get on your knees and you pray, and God will open the door. He will give you the willingness and the courage. He will open the door for you to make those amends. And I started to do the work. And beyond my wildest dreams, things started to happen, for me, because I cannot hold on to resentments. It says resentments is the number one offender. It kills more alcoholics than anything else. I went up to Elmira prison, because I had to get free. I didn't go up there to forgive that man. I didn't go up there to make amends. You know what? I needed to be free of the resentment, the fury, the rage that I had for that man. And I went up there and I faced him, and I had to forgive him, because I can't be of service to God and holding on to resentment against you. I can't. It is impossible. It is impossible. My sponsor explained to me, all the things that you had done and you want God to forgive you. How dare you think you don't have to forgive someone else? I don't care what the situation is. You see, the situation that he committed, that's between him and God. And I went up there and I did that work and I came out of there and God started working on me from the inside out. You know what? He allowed me to be a woman with integrity. I told you what I was like. I told you what happened to me, and he said, he's restored that relationship with my mom about about 2 years after that. Me and my dad started developing a relationship. I had never had a relationship with him. On May 1st, my dad died of cancer. It took my dad away from me, but before he died, my dad was one of us. He had 7 years, but he couldn't stay, and that's okay. But he was one of us, and he started to say to me, you know what, Patty, I'm so sorry I wasn't a part of your life. You're such a good daughter. Let me tell you, if I hadn't found you, there was absolutely no way for him to be able to say that. That day, on May 1st, my dad died. The next day, I was supposed to be getting married. And the month before that, I had shared with my dad because he didn't ever want me to get married again. He said, marriage is not for you, Patty, so you just stay away from that. But I had met someone that became an extremely important part of my life. And I met him in here, and when I first met him, I was still about the game, and so when I met him, I was going to try and manipulate him and stuff like that, and God had another plan. He let him into my life. He did what he needed to do, and he left my life. And at this convention 3 years ago, in 2001, that March, we shared some time, and we had a wonderful time at this conference, and we started talking, and the next thing I knew, in April, I had a ring on my finger, so I told my dad, and May 2nd, I married that man. He's a wonderful husband, and I got married to him, and God, he is so loving and so kind and so awesome. He allowed me that I had been in the house for 21 years, and I had to let that house go. And me and this husband, we built a new house, and, we moved in our house on December 6th and December 28th. Another test of things would happen, and my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and God just taught us how to hold fast to one another and not let go and to trust him. They told that husband at that particular time that he would have 10 months to live. He's still here. He's sitting right here right now because of God. I don't do anything to jeopardize my sobriety, nor do I associate with anyone that would jeopardize my sobriety. It's the most precious and important thing in the world to me. And they talk about it on page 570. It says, for the newcomers, there is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which will never fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. That merely means, y'all, check it out. And I'm going to close with this. And this is a poem, and I love it, and I want to share it with you. It says, climb till your dreams come true. It says, often the road would be rugged and more than you think you can do. Often the path will be hard and hills insurmountable too. But always remember the hills ahead are never as steep as they seem. And with faith in your heart, start upward and climb till you reach your dream. There is nothing in life that is worthy, is ever too hard to achieve. If you have the courage to try it and you have the faith to believe, for faith is a mover of mountains. There is nothing that God cannot do. So start out today with faith in your heart and climb till your dreams come true. Thanks.